Hey guys, welcome to Finance Friday. We're back again. Today talking about a topic which we've been through this week. So this has been the self-care week on Life on My Terms, and we have with us today Spurti Ravi, a food scientist, health and wellness advocate, and she also runs her own R&D consulting firm called Sprout. And Spurti is vegan by choice now, and I'd leave it to her to talk a little bit about herself.
Thank you, Deepika. It's so much fun to be here at the Get Bases HQ. I'm really excited to get into this topic because it is really close to my heart. And I think honestly, even 20 to 30 minutes is not going to be enough. Yeah. So let's see how much we can cover today.
Cool. So the format we're going to follow is a couple of questions that I've come across and we've come across, whether on the group or otherwise, and some of you have specifically asked for questions to be answered by Spurti, so we will do that in the latter part of the chat today. So Spurti, very quick question which is very relevant to me too. Mm-hmm. We all are getting more and more conscious about our eating habits and the alternates, whether we want to say supplements, organic food, all of that. It's pretty expensive. Mm-hmm. So how do you still remain healthy on a budget?
I think that's a great question for us to start off with, because I feel really bad, and I think it's really a shame that as society we've reached a point where health is equivalent to being expensive.
Yeah.
And I think it should be exactly the opposite, in fact. So I think many people must have heard of Michael Pollan. He's an investigative journalist. He's done a lot of research into the agriculture and the food system. And through all his years of work, he summed everything up into one specific statement, right? It was eat real food, mostly plants, not too much. It's as simple as that. So I think sticking to local whole foods, sticking to ghar ka khana is all we need to be healthy. We really don't need to get into these diets and trends and fads. The first thing that I think people need to change their mindset about is that they need to consume a specific ingredient or product to be healthy. Okay. So I think there was a phase when quinoa was all the rage in India, right? I think people stopped eating rotis, rice. They basically ate everything possible with quinoa. Like, quinoa is good for you, it has its benefits, but it's not going to change anyone's life or health if everything else remains the same. So whether it's like quinoa, kale, whey protein, it's not one ingredient. Or even getting into a lot of these trends and fad diets, like keto diet, for example, where people are consuming a lot of fat, a lot of meat, and they're not doing it in the right way. That's not going to be beneficial to your health long term. And also, I think even like I am a vegan. I'm very passionate about being vegan. I believe in eating plant-based, but you don't need to be eating out at expensive vegan restaurants to be healthy. I absolutely disagree with that. So I think in terms of tips, there are 3 easy tips that everyone can follow. They're not going to be sexy and glamorous. I think you must have heard it from your parents and grandparents, but honestly, that is the truth. I think the first one is drink water. I think for hydration, for better performance, to stay alert and active, water can do wonders. We've heard so much about it, but we take it for granted.
So basic.
Because it just doesn't seem as like fun and exciting as saying, hey, I'm picking up this bottle of green juice and paying 200 rupees for it, and that's going to make me healthier. So I think, avoid all those things, stick to water. If you want to have a fruit juice once in a while, go for it. But think of it more for your taste than anything else. It's not really going to dramatically change your health if you're consuming all those ingredients in other ways.
Okay.
The second is, I think, eating local foods and whole foods. So when I think, like in India especially, we're so blessed to have so many different varieties of vegetables, fruits, grains, etc. And it's really a shame that we kind of choose one and stick to it for a long period of time. So the more you eat all of this, which is local, first benefit is that typically it is going to be fresher because it hasn't come from halfway across the world. Second is it's going to be tastier and more flavorful because it is fresher.
Yeah.
And thirdly is the nutritional profile is going to be a lot more optimal because they haven't used any methods to keep the apple fresh for, let's say, 6 months.
Correct.
For it to come from Washington to Bangalore. And the other benefit of eating local and eating a diverse variety of foods is, let me take a step back. We've heard a lot about probiotics right now, and everyone knows the importance of probiotics for gut health.
Yeah.
And we all know that we have a lot of microorganisms that live within us that we benefit from. Now, when you eat a specific variety of food, you're only helping certain microorganisms grow. But when you eat a nice wide variety of foods, you're helping a lot more types of microorganisms to grow within you. So actually, having a good diverse microbiome has shown to have a lot of benefits, both for mental health as well as for physical health. So that's also something that we should not take for granted.
Okay, that's very interesting. And just to add to that, since we're talking about fresh and local produce, etc., what's your thought about seasonal fruits and seasonal vegetables?
That's great, because it's an automatic side effect, right? If you're eating local, you're not going to have something that was harvested, let's say, last year. It's automatically going to be more seasonal. And when you start eating seasonal, you start creating more diversity in what you eat. Because let's say we're having apples, for example. Now it's the season for apples from Himachal, and Kashmir will slowly kick in. Now, if you wanted apples 3 months ago, you wouldn't get local apples. You'd have to buy your imported ones. So by default, you'll eat other fruits then, which are in season. And now apples are in, and you're going to pick up those apples.
And they're cheaper, the seasonal.
Much cheaper. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, a kg of local apples now, and I buy organic, it's still about 150 rupees or so. And I think if you have to pick up like these Royal Gala or Washington apples, they're probably around 80 to 90 per apple.
Yeah, they're easily about 240, 250 bucks a kilo.
So if you do the math, it just doesn't make sense. You know, even if you're in a budget, like choose something that's seasonal, you have all these benefits, and it's going to be much cheaper.
Yeah, so I guess eat local, eat seasonal, and they automatically fall into your budget.
Exactly. The last is, I think, start cooking. We don't have to be master chefs. We don't need an elaborate spread every night or at lunchtime on our tables. We just need simple, basic, wholesome food. And I think once everyone, I think, man or woman, at some point of time should cook for themselves. I think our parents, my dad, falls into a very different generation. I don't know how many times he probably does that. But today I've seen both genders, right, actually get into it. And I think it really helps develop a personal relationship with food. And you're putting in such good energy. You're putting in that energy that you want to nourish yourself. You want to feed your family. It's why do we think of our grandma's cooking as some of the best? Maybe not because it's the best recipe, because of all the TLC she puts into it. And that really comes through in the food. So I think, you know, cooking at home is not just going to be a lot cheaper, especially when you use local seasonal ingredients, but also it has the right energy around it. You start learning so much more about food, and, you know, it's in your control at the end of the day, right? By eating out at a restaurant, you have no idea what they're using. So why give away that control? Keep it. And as long as, like, I would say at least 80% of the time you're eating at home, and 20% of the time, like, eat elsewhere, enjoy whatever you want to enjoy. And that should still be good enough for, like, a long-term, healthy, sustainable lifestyle.
Yeah, makes complete sense, and I think we should follow that. Coming to the next question, and I think this kind of links back to everything that we're always talking about on our community. Do you see any clear correlation with financial and physical wellness? And if you want to add anything else to it.
I would definitely say yes. The reason is, like, if we think about stress, right? We've all experienced stress at some point in our lives.
Right.
I think, and when we've experienced that stress, we felt the impact both on our bodies physically as well as on our minds mentally. And Deepika, correct me if I'm wrong, but finances are one of the major causes of stress, right?
I think the biggest cause of...
Yeah, as an individual, I feel like if your finances are not in order, you don't feel as confident, you don't feel as, confident to take on the goals that you have or to live the purpose that you have. In relationships, it can be absolutely damaging. You know, we've all heard of those stories. So finances are a major cause of stress, and stress, as we know, negatively affects both our bodies and our minds.
Right.
So in my mind, both three things actually: financial wellness, physical wellness, mental wellness, they're all interdependent. And I think we have to start cultivating a really positive energy with money. And I think you guys are doing a great job with it on your community by educating us and really helping us know more, which makes us get more comfortable, right?
Right.
So I think, that's the reason why it's very, very important, and we shouldn't take it lightly that, if our finances are all over the place and we could be living the most healthiest lives, we're still not going to be at peace.
Right. So it's all directly related and take care of all these aspects.
Exactly.
And I think, the more we talk to people, while it doesn't come about on the surface, when you dive a little deeper and realize that all their problems are somehow related to money, and money is really an enabler, whether it's going to help us make the right food choices, right living, or physical choices as well.
Exactly. And I can speak from personal experience as well, right? There was a time when I was earning consistently for a long period of time with a full-time job, then I moved over to a more independent consulting role. And when you don't know what you're getting and you don't know how to manage that, I think it really put me in a place where I was a lot more nervous about various things in my life, which also affected the decisions I made around health and wellness.
I think it's a very relevant point, and glad you brought it up, because there are many women on our community who are working as consultants, working freelance, taking a break in their careers. I think this is really going to hit home with them. Coming to our next question, this is again selfishly, some part of it is related to me. So I do use supplements, and I think I've had this discussion with you at some point, haven't stopped them completely. So I use supplements. Also, there is the fact that they are expensive. Like no supplements really come cheap. How do we really gain whatever we gain, nutrition or whatever value you might want to call it, from supplements through our food?
So I think first thing, let's talk about the supplement industry itself, right? It's a highly unregulated industry and it's a gray area. Food is regulated, pharma and your medicines that you take are regulated, supplements are not. So it's the onus falls on the company to make sure they're doing all the due diligence to give you what they're claiming to give you. So with this, obviously there are folks and companies that are doing a fantastic job, and they've invested a lot into R&D to make these supplements effective, but there are also an equal number, or probably more of them, who are in this for commercial reasons. So they don't have great quality supplements. They're not effective. And it's funny, I have a family full of doctors on one side, and they all call, they claim that by taking supplements, you're just creating expensive pee, because you're just consuming it and it gets excreted out. It's not being absorbed, it's not being utilized by your body. Now, having said that, I do believe that there is a place for supplements in everyone's diet and lifestyle, and it really depends on the case. The first option is always to use whole foods. I think if you can get it through food, why would you want to pop a pill, right? For example, if I take my own deficiencies, I've been calcium deficient for as long as I remember. I think as a child, I went to the pediatrician. I got quite a few supplements. Then even as I grew up, like through physicians, and I moved around the world, same story, had to keep popping those pills. Never that effective either, long term. And I turned vegan about 2.5 years ago now. And when I did that, I became a lot more conscious on all my nutritional gaps and how do I fulfill them using whole foods. So what I started doing is eating a lot of sesame seeds, because they're a great source of calcium, eating a lot of dark leafy greens, so like spinach, methi, etc. And when I did my blood work a year into it, it's the highest my calcium levels have ever been, which was even shocking to me. I was like, I didn't take any pills, no supplements. It was only through food. I just started becoming a little bit more conscious and creative with it. And I think it's a great example to show that you don't need supplements. A lot of things can be obtained from whole foods. And also what happens is, when you eat it through the food, you have the fiber, you have the carbs, and all these other components would actually help your body absorb it better and utilize it better. So it's just not the fact that you took it, but it's also being utilized for the reason that you want it. But on the other hand, I've had a vitamin D deficiency as well. Now that's something I really haven't been successful in solving through whole foods only. So I do take a supplement for it. So I would say there's a place for some supplements, for some there isn't. One, I think you need to do your own research. If you are buying supplements, make sure you do a lot of research around the companies, that it is effective, and it's a good quality product. Please don't stinge money on that, because then it's worth nothing to you, and then you should be good.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you spoke about basic things again, like methi, palak, if you want to say palak.
Yeah, we don't need a kale.
Yeah, or sesame seeds. They are just so affordable and so daily in our groceries, and we easily skip these sometimes and pull out the most expensive one on the shelf.
Yeah.
Cool. So some interesting stuff coming out, and I'm learning always about such things. Okay, quick question for you. What are your tips on being a good spender, considering there are so many elements to your life spending which might be very different from someone else's, like clearly health being a priority. So what would you say, how are you a good spender?
I don't know if I could qualify myself as a good spender. I do feel one thing is I'm very comfortable spending what I spend. So one of my philosophies has been, and it's part of this, having a positive relationship with money. If I am spending, I want to spend it heartily, and I want to get what I get in exchange for it. So along those lines, couple things that I've done not related directly to food is more around conscious living and a less is more philosophy. I think it just falls in line with the spiritual growth that I would want and the journey that I'd like to take. And I really don't spend a lot of money on clothes or shoes or bags or anything. It's not a priority for me. I don't see the need for it, and I think I actually end up saving a lot because of it, which I never realized till actually we've spoken a while back, and I was like, oh, I never thought about it. I think one is conscious living, less is more, quality over quantity. Second is the local seasonal, right? Going back to it, when you shop these types of ingredients, it really does not cost you much, and I am particular about using organic ingredients. It's something that I would like to put money into. I think there are a lot of questions from people. The moment you say organic, they're like, how do you know it's organic? One thing I found out is, over time, when you continue to use organic ingredients and you shift over, let's say, I have to make a quick run and I have to buy some vegetables, not even from a Sabzi Mandi, I would say more these like large retail stores. The produce quality is so subpar. Like, I can really taste it. My salads are not as good. My sabzis are not as good. So I think one is the taste factor itself. But also when you think about it long term, right? Like, we're talking about something being a little bit more expensive today, but if you think about all the detrimental effects pesticides have shown to have and the impact on your medical bills down the line, I think we don't think about the future, we're only thinking about today.
Now,
But if you take that into account, it's totally worth spending that money today. So you are healthy and you have to spend less on medical bills, hospitalization, and all those things later down the line. I also think using cooking more at home and using less packaged foods is great both for your health and in terms of it keeps your wallets fuller. Because packaged foods are great for a treat. They're great for an occasional treat or convenience, but health-wise, most of them really don't bring that much value to you. You could do a much better job at home, whatever it is. So I think with these, three areas, I feel like my spending is pretty in control. I feel good about it. I do prioritize health and wellness overall, and I don't feel guilty about it at all.
Yeah, so what I gather out of this, of course, is how we need to spend, but having a positive relationship with your money and your food, because I know several times I have a not so positive relationship with food, making these choices which I don't want to eat really, and I think it really, now that I think of it, it affects how I'm thinking, how I'm feeling at that point in time. I think, that's great. Probably assess how you feel after you eat.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind is, like, I've said cook at home, make homemade food, whether it's you or your family member a couple times, is even if it seems daunting in the beginning, start really small. It could be like one pot of khichdi, it could be like one dal that you make. You don't have to go big. And the more you eat at home, the more your palate conditions to it.
Yeah.
So you will actually notice yourself that you would want to eat lesser outside over time, because you can start tasting that quality is not as good. They probably use that oil I don't know how many times before it's come into your food. And mind you, the restaurants use a lot of packaged foods. They are not buying everything fresh, making sauces from scratch, making things from scratch. A lot of it is packaged, preserved. Things that you avoid on the shelf, you may be getting through the restaurant. So there's just, your palate and your body is very smart. Your body will start telling you when it feels very good. You just need to trust it and give it some time to get to that point.
Great, and I'm glad you brought the fact about when you said cooking and start small, and so relevant to what we tell people when it comes to managing their money. It's not so daunting. Start small. Like it's literally as simple as getting started on that khichdi. Start with something which is simple. And
exactly.
Like do it a couple of times, familiarize yourself with it, and then probably take the next big step. Quick question for you. So now that your area of expertise is really food and all that's related to it, what challenges do you feel when it comes to investing or building your savings over time?
So I think for me, the biggest hurdle that I had to overcome was trust issues. Like, I don't trust financial institutions as much. I don't trust myself because I don't know much about the entire world of finances, how it works. Like all these terms like equities, stocks, debts, liquid, all this gets thrown at me, and it's a vocabulary, and I've learned that over time with you guys actually. It's vocabulary that sounds very complex, but it's actually very, very simple. So for me, that was a major hurdle. So I did exactly what you suggested before, is to baby steps. I spoke to your team. I learned about the basics, like what are mutual funds? What are the different ways in which you can invest in a mutual fund? SIP is one way, lump sum investments are another way. I'm showing off a little bit of the knowledge that I learned, but it's just, and I started with like an amount of 10,000 rupees, right? Like I didn't want to go too big. It still felt like something that is substantial, but that's all I wanted to put into it. That was as much that I wanted to risk with it. And now that I've gone through that cycle for over a year, I've built confidence. I've also learned so much through a lot of your Finance Fridays, etc. Like I know these terms, I know what they mean. So I feel a little bit more empowered to take these decisions. So I think I finally overcome that hurdle. I'm slowly like growing into that entire investing space. I'm a late bloomer when it comes to that, but I've already seen the benefits. And I think more important than not, it's that confidence level, and I know that I have my finances in order, and that gives me so much peace, and I feel like I can really, pursue my goals,
do other stuff.
The world. And I don't have to worry. Like I keep adjusting, obviously, based on, how much I have to save, how much I have to spend, but it's not limiting me in any way. I just have to get creative about it.
Yeah, and it's so nice to hear that, and just the language you're probably talking now is probably so much different from a conversation say we must have had 6 months ago, and somewhat familiar, like you said, through the content. And I think that's a gap we're trying to build here and fill here, the knowledge gap, because that's pretty much when you say you find financial institutions untrustworthy. All it takes is to fill a knowledge gap, whether it's food, whether it's finances, whatever it might be. And I'm glad to hear that we're doing some bit of it with
I've sent you out quite a few of my questions as well, so hope to see some more Finance Fridays around that.
Great. So that was it on the front of questions that we had for you. There are some questions that have come through from the community, and I'm just going to pick them up very quickly. Starting with the question from Neha Singh.
Okay.
Very, very good one. And I have something to add on to that. If I had only 1,000 rupees a month on a very limited budget to spend on exotic/organic groceries, what are those 1 or 2 or 3 things that you think are must-dos for her 7-year-old child?
I think first, let's take a step back when we answer this question. We have a child in the picture here, right? And it's so interesting, and I think it's actually a great thing that people start becoming more health conscious when there's a child in their family or a child comes in. I think that basically shows a little self-love towards ourselves, right? Because we shouldn't be waiting for someone else to start improving what we eat.
Yeah.
So it's an important reminder for all the mums out there and everyone else who's managing families is, your health and your wellness is an equal priority. So ideally start before. And also start being a great role model to your kids. I've seen so many parents who are eating, samosas on one side and like feeding their kids broccoli and carrots on the other. Like, you have to be that example that they follow. Kids observe a lot more. They actually learn by example, not by what's being told to them. And I think we've all been kids at some point of time. We haven't listened to our parents, but we've observed a lot of what we've seen them do. And I think the same applies to food choices as well. So if you want your kids to live a healthy life, you need to start living a healthy life today, having good movement, having good food choices. So getting back to the question, I think the way I look at it is, so the Environmental Working Group releases this list called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean List in the US mainly, of 12 items which are commonly filled with pesticides that they recommend that you should buy organic, and 12 that are actually pretty clean by default, and they typically don't use a lot of pesticides in them, so you should be good. So it basically helps you budget your money better. Having said that, I also am not aware of how much that applies to the Indian scenario. But what I've read is like ingredients like tomatoes, potatoes, they have a ton of pesticides that are being used in them, and that's like such a staple in all our households, right? Like we use so many onions, potatoes, tomatoes, apples, bananas, grapes, the basics. So I would say invest in those basics, convert that to organic as quickly as possible, and then slowly things like, whether it's avocados, pineapples, broccoli, etc. These use less pesticides, I believe, but again, it can vary from grower to grower. But maybe, and you don't use them as frequently, right? So it's best to kind of leave those out for now and start with, your staples and the produce items that you use a lot more of. And typically, I've heard that cereals like, millets, etc., they're not as problematic. They're not typically even genetically modified like some of our other crops are. And organic ingredients they cannot be genetically modified. That's a given. So when you're choosing something organic, it's just not the fact that there are no pesticides being used. It's also the fact that they're never genetically modified. So they're always natural varieties. So I think, you start with these staples and then transition over slowly as you get more comfortable. And personally, I also feel like changing up your spices has a huge difference. Your food tastes so much better when you start buying organic spices, and we use so little of it. We use a little bit of like jeera, cumin, what else? We use mustard seeds, haldi. And I think it's a small price and it lasts you for such a long period of time. So I would highly recommend, transitioning your spice cabinet as well.
So transition the basics basically. I think so simple. And in the same breath, and I'm guilty of having these things at home, and I thought it might be interesting to talk about them if we can just pass on. So peanut butter, ketchup, and I think if not peanut butter, ketchup is a staple in most households. I know it's bad, but I'd love to hear why it's bad and how it's so bad, and we don't really consider that when we buy it.
Sure. So I think first, let's just learn how to read a package, right? Actually, everything you want to know about the food that's in there is also on the package. It's regulated. So manufacturers have to write the ingredients that go into it and the nutritional value. And I think today I see people are flipping the packs more, reading more than probably our parents and grandparents did, which is a great thing. And, I hate to say this, but I'm really not a fan of ketchup because I think it's so overused. I see kids who don't like something and parents will just douse a lot of ketchup on it to get them to eat it. And if you look at the ingredients here, right, because there's water, tomato paste. So firstly, that's like a nice cooked tomato paste, which is fine. It's not fresh. Then you have sugar, you have salt, then you have all these numbers like acidity regulator, thickener. These are all additives that are put into the product so it can stay on the shelf and you can keep it for a long period of time. If you were to make, let's say, a tomato chutney at home, how long would it last you?
Not so tasty though.
Not so tasty for sure, but that goes back to the palate reconditioning, right? Like the moment you start slowly phasing this out, you won't even when you start eating ketchup, you'll probably feel like, oh my gosh, this is too sweet. This is too much for me. So I think like preservatives, regulators, thickeners, these are all added to make your food last long. And it's fine to do it occasionally. We all like to indulge a little bit. But do we need to be having this every day? Absolutely not.
Yeah. So when it comes to the nutritional value, I think they don't have it.
They have it here.
So what's the usual good breakup of?
So it's really hard to say what's a good breakup because it depends on how you combine all the foods, right? Because you're never going to eat ketchup alone. Now let's say you had ketchup with like a couple broccoli sticks or carrot sticks. That entire meal's nutritional composition is very different than if you had ketchup with like 2 samosas.
Right.
So I think I would focus less on that, but also the fact that you want a clean label, you want no preservatives in it, and there are, I think, companies coming out with better versions slowly. So start looking out for it and educate yourself around it.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because very interesting. It just makes me think. Sorry if I'm kind of linking this back to finances, but it's much like diversifying your portfolio. There will always possibly be that element which is not so good for your portfolio, but it's okay. It's not so bad as long as it's a small proportion of it. I think we have a live question here. In fact, interestingly, it was the question which was next on my list as well from Sushma and from Gauravi. So, are organic foods regulated in India? And in the same breath, standard labeling, I guess, because they're not regulated as much. It seems to be absent on organic products. So how do you trust that something is genuinely organic or not?
So I think the first way that I mentioned earlier also is you should be able to tell the difference in the produce and the grains. Once you start eating more of it, like forget about all the regulations labeling, you yourself can start telling the difference. So I think that's an important, important metric to use. In terms of regulations, there are regulations in India. There are bodies that certify whether your products are organic or not. You'll see on, the more popular brands, which are your Pure and Sure, Dhatu, etc. They are, doing the due diligence around laboratory testing, etc. to make sure that their products are organic. And then even a lot of smaller companies, one of my favorites is like Happy Healthy Me here in India. They also go through rigorous testing and theirs is USDA certified. So if you typically see a USDA organic, which a lot of people in India also offer, it is a pretty well-regulated system mainly for the US market, and a lot of it from India is actually imported for the US market. So they also end up selling it here. So you can easily trust those. Then there is NBOP, a couple other organizations that look into it here. If we take all of this out of the equation, the labeling, etc., the other way is if someone is telling you this is 80% better than this, I don't know about how most people think. Like, I don't need it to be 100% perfect. Even if you tell me that this is 80% better than my conventional produce, then I'd rather put my money in this and run with the fact that, they are doing a good job. In India, I think because of the way our cities are built up now, we're a little bit more disconnected from the farmers, which is probably very different to how our households ran a couple, decades ago, when our grandparents were using produce, etc. Is get to know your farmer, right? So if you're buying from a local sabzi mandi, maybe it's not organic, but get to know them, learn about what they do, and they're also ultimately, if they're consuming the produce and they're comfortable with it, that means you can consume it, because farmers are very sensitive to a lot of these chemically treated products, and they don't like eating them, and they grow separate vegetables in their own patch, in fact. So, because they've learned about the effects of these pesticides, right? So, I think, build those trusting relationships. It may not be 100% organic, but it'll be as close to a good quality produce as you can get. And I would say trust the big brands in India. They are doing their due diligence. There's a lot of chemical laboratory testing being done. So run with it. It's going to be much better than your conventional produce in most cases.
Yeah, very interesting, and I'm glad to hear that. I hate to be doing this, but last one on finance and food. When, like you mentioned, get to know your farmers better or get to know the products better. So much relevance to financial products as well. Get to know them better, because only when you familiarize yourself will you be able to make a change. In fact, on the Basis app, we have currently about 9 to 10 learning modules where our first step is, hey, first you learn, then you kind of familiarize yourself over time, and then you invest. And very much like food, and probably things I'm going to now apply to mine. Food choices that learn, and then, you know, like do it for a bit and then like dive deeper. Cool. So last question, two questions left. I'm going to go through them very quickly. One question from Punita asking about eggs. So we see this in the supermarket so much. You see organic and non-organic version. Not quite sure what they mean, and what are non-organic eggs even, or...
So I think when it comes to organic eggs specifically, now it also, so you have chicken, right? The chicken lays eggs.
Yeah.
Now it also depends on what the chicken is eating. So let's see if the chicken is eating, before the chicken would roam around, they would eat grass, whatever was put around. But now because of factory farming, unfortunately, there's a lot of misuse of how they're treated. I'm going to keep my vegan heart aside for this conversation, but also they're given a lot of genetically modified crops. Like soy is one of the most genetically modified crop that's used as feed out there. So when they say organic, typically what it means is it's also what the chicken is eating is controlled.
So the chicken is eating organic?
Yes. So they should be eating non-genetically modified foods that is organic. Also typically means that they aren't given a lot of like hormones, growth hormones, antibiotics, etc. So automatically the eggs that they lay are better. So if we think about like a mom and a child, for example, it's what the mom eats is what the child carries as well. It's the same thing for the eggs, right? So it is regulated from the feed of the chicken to the end product of even how the eggs are managed. A lot of times, companies put chemical coatings on eggs and things like that to last. Typically with organic, you're not allowed to do all of that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. Although I'm a vegetarian, good to know and follow. Last question from Henna, and I think true to most of our lives. How healthy is it to eat food from restaurants every week? I know you spoke about some part of it earlier. Of course, from a financial health point, not the best choice to do, but from a physical health point, what are your takes on this?
I think I've kind of been pretty clear on this by honing in on the point about cooking. But I think like even using an 80-20 rule, like 80% of the time you eat home, 20% of the time you eat out. Like, obviously, eating outside food is delicious sometimes. Like even if we know it's bad for us, there's something about like good Indian Chinese food that hits the spot. So it's okay, but don't do it frequently. What I see happening today, and I'm guessing this is what Henna alluded to as well, is especially with all of us working so hard, right? We're always in office spaces, we're always commuting in Bangalore traffic. We don't get time. Time is a major factor. So one, I think you should start looking for easier recipes that don't take a lot of time to just cook one thing that's good for you. That should be good enough. Carry a lot of fruits. You don't need to do any prep. You peel, you eat, or sometimes like an apple, you don't even peel, you wash and you eat. But when people I've seen are eating out every meal.
Or ordering in.
The Swiggies and Zomato's great for convenience, but sometimes I think they've really spoiled us in a way that we've just taken it for granted. Apart from the waste that we're creating, even the food that we're eating, it's not of good quality. So I think that to continuously eat your breakfast from there, your lunch from there, your snack from there, your dinner from there, absolute no. I think 100% no. You have to, if you want, like slowly phase it out. If you are at 100% right now eating out, I hope nobody is there right now. But bring it down to, let's say, like 75% eating out and 25% home, and slowly create a transition plan for yourself. But you have to get to a point where most of it is cooked in-house. If you're sharing a room with a couple people, get a cook to help you out with it, so you don't have to spend some time. I really think that money is worth it.
Great. I think, so avoiding extra expenses via Swiggy, Zomato. I know a lot of our wallets are hit by this these days. So thank you, Spurti. I know we've run a little over time, but it was important to address all these areas. Thank you all for being a part of this conversation, and hope you enjoyed our self-care week. Please drop in any more questions related to food. Spurti would be available to answer them offline at least. And stay tuned for the next couple of weeks coming up on Life on My Terms. They're going to be very exciting. We are coming up with some fun stuff for you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.